Right. All right. So, hey everyone. So I'm Fahad. Um, so for today's workshop, I want this to be somewhat conversational, almost a discussion. Like I know I'll be, considering that a lot of us are sort of unfamiliar with product management itself. I know a lot of this will be mostly me, kind of describing stuff and describing some of the responsibilities and what it's about. But feel free to just jump in, ask questions, raise hands, whatever. Just totally just interject me. It's totally okay. So I'll just if I'm going too fast, also just let me know. I'll try to cover. My goal is to cover a high-level understanding of product management, what exactly we do, some of what the roles or requirements are, responsibilities are, some of the challenges we face, what it kind of means, put some context into why this is in the tech workshops and what this means in a technology company. Okay. So if I'm going over anything that seems a little too, just a little too detailed or too advanced, just let me know. I'll try to, clarify as much as I can. I'll also leave about 10 minutes or 15 minutes at the end as soon as the deck is over to ask any questions. Okay, so I'll start off with a background on myself just to give some context. Um, I come from an economics background, and I do have a non-traditional technology background as well. Way back in 2014, I built a small business, chauffeur service, primarily just a ground transportation throughout New York City, mostly high-end clients, just a boutique luxury car service, as you can say. That was like my first itch on trying to build something. I've tried building other things prior to it, like airplanes on like on Etsy websites and stuff. Like I've always tried to build some businesses. Majority failed. Some of them, like, well, this one did pretty good, but majority of them are just a work in progress. Fast forward a couple years, did a bunch of internship roles, primarily in software engineering. Worked over Memorial Sloan Kettering, which is where I worked as a systems development intern. Worked on the back end for the cancer center over there. In CNN, I worked over in their CNN business, CNN Money division, primarily on their web-facing applications. Then I went over to Venture for America, which is a nonprofit. Worked on a mentor slash like a mentor to student connection platform over there. And then I spent my time in Northwell Health, where I did two stints, one in software engineering, primarily just development of our tech incubation. We did a lot of POCs and a lot of prototypes with some pretty cool stuff. Our goal was really to just incubate some really innovative products. Um, and then I had a perfect segue to be a product management intern there. So from developing the code, I was starting to actually have a say in building out some of the products itself, what it would be, like what the users would like and how to manage it with stakeholders and manage a product with the engineers that are involved. Currently, I work as a technology product manager in finance. I'm in the S&P Global Ratings. My product itself is a database. We have two teams, one over here in New York, one on Hyderabad, India. Both of us work together to manage this database, which is ultimately used to distribute research information, rating information, credit, and mostly just financial details over to different products, whether it be other engineers who use our products or take our data to, render it on their UI, or it is something along the lines of different vendors, Dow Jones, Bloomberg, you name it. We send over the data to them so they can use it for their products and their users. So yeah, so my stint in the product management started about since 2019, and I've been kind of focused within the technology product management space. So this is the reason why I asked how you guys, like if anyone's familiar with product management, it's kind of hard to define it. Even to this day, it's always a challenge to kind of define what product a product manager does or what we actually are, what the actual book definition is. Um, this is just a joke, but oftentimes it's really difficult to really portray what we're really doing. I think it's ultimately because it depends on the organization and the business, and primarily what we do within that business and what your product really is. So, product management in a really simple, I'm just going to try to make it super basic, and I'll try to make it, bring it to real life. Um, is the idea of bringing an idea and bring it to life. Okay, so an expectation of product management is, hey, I have an idea. This is like a software, right? So for us in a hackathon, we're working on an idea, and then we execute, right? We ship this, this, like, we can even just say product. In this case, you build some sort of web application, whatever, and then you release it, right? In reality, in an organization, is not as simple as taking an idea, building on it, coding it, building it, and deploying it into production. it the reality is that there are several requirements. Why are we making it? Or do we have the budget to make it? Do we have the dependencies online? Do we make sure that the users are happy with this? Do we make sure we get feedback that's proper for us? Okay, this product actually give any value to someone? Will someone be able to use it? Can we monetize it and make money off of it? How do we go to market and dominate a market? How do we take some sort of the market share? How do we make sure we increase revenue from that? And then make sure that we deploy something. We have all this, as you guys are working on a project, just like as we work on a large project, can we get this to production? Can we release this within a time frame? Let's say you want to do it before a very large convention or some sort of reasoning we have, like, okay, we want to present this over or release this by the end of this month or by the end of next year. We want to have this long-term plan. And how do we get that to happen? So the reality is a lot more like the right side. You go through and there's a lot of curves and there's just a lot of ups and downs. It's really not a straight line. So I'll try to bring it up into more reality, give you a practical definition of what this is. For instance, let's say, let's use a product like Instagram. Okay, so before I even go to the deck, I'll describe something. So Instagram as a product, I'm sure most of you guys know, I use it. So the app has a user interface, right? You're working with the product, you're swiping, you're double tapping, you're interacting with it, right? Then you have the actual technology, the backend, holding your followers, following counts, database holds your information, right? All the information for each user, has all of your likes and preferences. That way they're able to recommend you better content for your feed. All of this is built on the backend. Engineers are working to build that, right? And then we have business where, like let's say, hey, we would like to generate more revenue. In order to do that, maybe we should, find a way to introduce reels or introduce a way we can show ads, right? So you want to have like some sort of idea, or maybe it's top level coming in from like the CEO or CTO. Hey, we want to make sure we undercut any competitors like Snapchat, and we want to make sure that we do better than any of our competitors or something like that, or grow 5% users by the end of the year, right? So there's some metrics or some sort of high level OKR, like, okay, this is what we plan on doing from business. So product managers are kind of right in the middle of that. They are defined as our neighborhood hedge funds Two Sigma says, PMs at tech companies aim to create software products that customers love. I would kind of make it a little more, I'll elaborate further. We want to build features that users like to use. And in order to do that, we have to, as I said, the line is kind of curvy, it's not very straight. We have to touch multiple sides, touch the UX, touch technology, business. You can touch legal if you're working in certain places, like in my organization, or compliance and regulatory, and you just make sure everything kind of falls in line. And the goal is to make the squiggly line on the right side as straight as possible, like the left one. So ultimately, as a product manager, we try to figure out the what and the why. You'll hear that quite often in this field in general. We want to know what we want to build and why we want to build it. For instance, you want to find a way to introduce increased revenue from using Instagram. For an ad, for let's say for reels that pop up, and you realize that there's a huge potential in adding reels there, you decide to pop in ads in between them or once you click on one. Why? Because it generates more revenue. It's another way for users to get personalized content. There's many reasons why, and those sort of metrics make sense. So you want to release it. So ultimately, the goal is to deliver features that make the users happy, and happy users are generally good for business. Does that make sense? Hopefully. Okay. So what am I really doing? What am I actually doing here? So this sounds like super high level, like, I'm just trying to think of like things to think of creative things to build. So we'll start with 3 bullets. I think these are kind of clear. Speaking of leadership and internal leads to understand the strategy and the OKR. OKR is like kind of a objective key results, I believe they call it. So it's just like kind of a top going down. These are the objectives. These are kind of the metrics we want to reach. Let's say like we want to reduce or we want to grow by like 5%, but it's super simply like we want to grow 5% revenue by the end of the year. Or we want to reduce customer attrition by an X amount of percent. So we speak to leadership. They have a large long-term strategy. They may have some sort of product vision, which I'll get to a little later. It's like, how do we envision our product in a future world? And the reality is that one product, and I use Instagram as an example because it's simple. Instagram is really it's one application. It is one app on your phone, but there's so many different components on it, and each one of those are almost like a product. So when you go into an organization, you have, let's say, a team of engineers. You have one team of engineers, maybe 5 engineers, and you have one product manager that's managing that product with those engineers. And then you have multiple parts. So let's say, for just to put in a simple example, like Google has Google Images, Google News, Google Jobs, and you name it. Each one of these can also be like their own product with an own product manager and a team of engineers that work to build that. Okay. So we have multiple products within one product ecosystem, if that makes sense. Now, I want to say one thing that's kind of important is like the North Star. This is kind of like the key indicator that we use to measure the success of a product. This is kind of what we describe an OKR to be. It's like this is the goal, this is the vision that we want to hit for our product. For our instance, for my instance, let's say in Northwell Health, when I interned in healthcare, one of the goals for us is to make sure that our patient satisfaction rate, is high. We want to make sure that they use us compared to any other urgent care or any other, clinic or whichever you name, and we want to prefer to use ours. So that's kind of like a vision for us. And when we look at a vision, we start thinking about, okay, let's speak to the user. Let's try to understand what they like, what they would want from us. So that goes to the second point. Speaking to users and understanding their needs. So we go through feedback loops, we get surveys, right? We try to understand, okay, this, our users, let's say for instance, in I'm in finance, so I'll try to give it's kind of boring, but I'll give an example. Let's say like our users will want to understand research that is on some sort of debt profile, right? They would want to understand why we give it some sort of rating. Typically, our organization provides ratings for different companies, countries, you name it. So so a user might want to be like, why are you rating it this way? Why do you want, like, can you give me more transparency? Maybe it'll help me make a better market decision. I want to invest X amount of millions of dollars into a stock. I want to understand why. So in order to do that, we go through surveys with our users. We try to understand what their needs are, whether our user is URI, somebody like, let's say, a shopping website like Zara would look to us as an average user and understand our user needs, or as a business to business, in my case, it would be like I would try to understand the vendor's needs. Let's say a stakeholder would be another engineer who uses our product or takes the data from our product. And we basically go to them and say, okay, so like, how is it working? Are there any issues and things like that? We try to get a feedback from them. If they give us suggestions, and people are always happy to give suggestions, hey, I would like to get this, or I would really like to know that. And we get that sort of feedback, we take it in, and we see if we can put it in a backlog, and we try to eventually take that onto the team and say, hey team, I want to build this. We see there's value here. There's XYZ, these metrics add up, and this will eventually add up to our product vision. How do we make this happen? So remember how I mentioned it's like the what and the why is what the PMs do. The how is where the engineering team and the rest of the organization, we figure out together, collaborate, and find out how to do that. So the PM can go in there and be, definitely contribute up to a certain degree on how they would like to be built. But the technical aspect, the how, right, the implementation is really controlled by the engineers. They have the flexibility and the freedom to say, okay, we want to build architecture like this. This is how we want to maintain it. So they own that portion of it. So that ultimately goes to the third part, right? So the third bullet is collaborating with engineers, designers, and dependent teams to figure out the how and target a release. So we work with all these dependent teams in those three circles that you saw earlier, and we target a release. Let's say we want to release something by the end of the month, or let's say we want to start incrementally releasing every week. So there's different patterns depending on the organization. Sometimes teams deploy in almost, like if you're in like a super fast tech company or in a startup, you may just be deploying very, very quickly. So that's also a big difference. Culture and product is very different in a startup versus a very large organization. A large organization, you have to collaborate with many, many engineers, many designers, many dependent teams. In a startup, you may not have so many dependencies. You may not have a ton of designers. You may not have a ton of engineers. You kind of work in more of a bootstrap. You're at that point, you're also doing marketing. You may also be doing documentation and writing. Even if you have an engineering background, you may actually just jump in and even code. So this sort of stuff happens as well. In Northwell Health, we are a large organization, but the tech incubator was basically kind of like think like a Y Combinator sort of thing, where we just go in, we try to put in a product, and if people like it, we get funded. So we kind of bootstrapped, and we take on a different, we touch different hand, put what do you call that? Wear different hats rather, and try to find different ways to build out the product, and we try to help however we can. So here's some examples. I'll just give some sort of value items. I won't go through all of this. This is quite detailed. So for instance, on Northwell Health on the left side, right, we work to provide wearable technologies using a one-stop patient information app. What does that do? It allows ease of access to patient health information securely for doctors. So let's say a doctor wants to know the vitals for a certain patient, right? We would like to work with Samsung and use their Samsung Wear OS or their Gear OS watches to be able to provide some sort of update, like, hey, I want to speak to the watch or say something to the watch that will then give me the details of that patient, all in a compliant manner, so that obviously we're not, there are no security issues, and making sure the data goes in properly, it's safe, and then it also has privacy for that patient. It's only between that doctor and that patient. So that's like an idea, like one can think about. Why? Because it makes the interaction between the patient a lot better. There's a lot of the bedside manners, it's better. There's more satisfaction that you can get from the patient. So that's one example, right? And we go to another example in a completely different field. Let's say like in where I am now in S&P Global Ratings, we work within data, right? And in particularly, I work as data as a service. So I'm providing data over to different vendors and different teams. So let's say one would be launching ESG scores. If someone cares about environment, social sustainability, governance, all of these sort of details, we provide that sort of transparency. We take that sort of data from wherever we get the source, we make sure it's okay, and then we provide it to all of our users, including some of our own paid products. So in my case, it's more of a B2B. In the Northwell case earlier, that's more like a B2C. We're working with the consumer directly. Does all of that make sense? So feel free to jump on if you have any questions at all. But I'm going to go to product vision, okay? And so is she, apparently. So I brought it up a couple times. So the product vision is a team success statement, okay? A company success statement, I should even say. It's a goal for the product. Now, here's 3 examples of what you can imagine a product vision to be. For Tesla, create the most compelling car company of the 21st century by driving the world's transition to electric vehicles. It sounds like they're pretty much doing that, right? And it sounds like that's their goal and that's the target, and everything they're building, whether it is the hardware, the engineering of the car, and then the internal engineering of the software, or to even from that to over the air updates, even the autonomous driving portion. How do they make sure that they are the most compelling car company? How do they take the market share compared to, let's say, Uber's ATG or Waymo or another competitor? How do they make sure that they're on top? So that's their team success statement, and that vision goes all the way downstream, cascades to all the Scrum, the team PMs and product managers, the team engineers, and we try to find a way to build and make that happen. So the product manager will take that sort of vision and be like, okay, this is an idea that may potentially help within this case, and this will potentially help our team success statement. Okay. Same thing with PayPal, right? You guys are familiar with PayPal. To democratize financial services to ensure that everyone, regardless of background or economic standing, has access to affordable, convenient, and secure products and services. So their goal is to become the B2C for financial payments, financial gateway payments, and you name it, whatever they call this, but just having transactional payments all on the, in an easy way for you. Northwell is the same example. As I mentioned earlier, we raised the standard of healthcare, right? We want to define tomorrow's healthcare through community health, education, research, and that's the vision. And we want to work towards that vision, and product managers help towards building that vision. So before I jump to a little more detail, if anyone has any questions, do you guys want to, is there anyone here that has any questions so far? Wants to bring up anything at all? Feel free to raise your hand while I get the charger for this. Okay. Okay, so we'll leave it. Let me continue. So we identify opportunities. As a product manager, we try to find ways where we can increase revenue, we can increase user growth, right? We look at the data, we see, okay, we're seeing a huge interaction for users putting in, let's say, Instagram for business, or let's just say we're finding a really good way for, let's say Tesla's doing excellent for doing, like, I don't know, they like to have safety features or enhancing their safety features. Users are really into that, right? Drivers are actually looking at that and they're like, wow, this car is super safe. It's like, the Cybertruck is like, it's like indestructible. That's awesome. We want to buy it. So these are sort of things, we've tried to find opportunities. Hey, is this an actual case for us to build something? So we try to get that and we enable adoption. That means we just try to get more users to get onboarded. And lastly, we're reducing customer attrition. We don't want people to walk away from our company and use a different product or use something else. We want to make sure that our customers, our users, stay within ourselves, right? Stay within our environment, our ecosystem. So we always try to find opportunities where we can grow. Now, as a product manager, we work with the team, right? I work with a team of engineers in my case, and I work with a team of designers and legal as well. And we work to manage the backlog in terms of priority to ensure the right things are developed for the right reasons. Now, you go to somebody and say, here's a wish list of what you can build, right? Let's just use your favorite app as an example, and you think about it. I want to do this, this, this. If I had the ability, I would have Spotify do X, Y, Z, and you name it. So we go and get feedback, right? And when they give us that feedback, we put it into a backlog. These are the list of items in the backlog that users would like, or this would be a use case, and we need to build this. This is the what and why, and we need to figure out the how. So we use a roadmap. We use a product roadmap. Let's say, for our case, our goal is as a data within S&P Global Ratings for our database, we want to make sure that users can ingest and consume the data in this fastest way possible. We want to reduce API development. We want to make sure that any sort of overhead costs and resource time is greatly decreased. Not only will that save us money, but it'll make users happy, right? And users who want to ingest their data, they don't have to go through the hoops and hurdles to get that. So that's like a let's say a goal and a roadmap. We'll build a roadmap based on that. Okay, first of all let's abstract the database. Let's try to make sure that there's ways that they can consume the API. Let's make sure that there's documentation available, different drivers if needed, so different languages can be able to different software languages can be able to cooperate with it. Different perspectives on how we can do that, and that doesn't mean it has to come from the product manager to build this. Sometimes the engineering team may do it, right? Or sometimes it may come from someone else, or it may come from a user. Somebody may just come in and give some feedback on, like, those ask us a question or contact us on a website and just be like, hey, I don't like why this is happening. They'll bring it up, and it eventually comes to somebody like a product manager who'd look at it. So we get feedback from users to help determine what features provide the best value, and this is where the metrics are important. You can't The thing is about getting in product management is that we want to build something, but in order to build it, we need to make sure that it makes sense, right? You're spending resource time, you're spending cost of a team of engineers. You want to make sure that whatever you're spending it on, you get an ROI, right? You get something back. Now, I know this sounds very businessy and techy, but I mean, well, more business, but I want to make sure that you understand that this is very close to technology, and product managers are typically in the technology space only. So nowadays you actually see them across the field. That's why it's in finance as well, but generally it's in technology companies where we're looking to find the middle ground between business and technology. And last but not least, I want to say check the data. We always check the data. As I just mentioned, we look at metrics. We try to make sure the metrics make sense, and that is why we prioritize something from the backlog. Okay, so a day in the life of a PM, I'll just tell you what I do typically in a day. So typically I'll wake up super early. I am almost always checking my emails. This is a recurring theme. Majority of my day, I'm always active on emails. If we have a release happening, and a team is building out releasing a new feature, they may release it through the weekend. Usually, the engineers will be working there during that time to deploy it, or working on a Friday night to make sure that's deployed. I'm there as well. We deploy. We check emails. We make sure that we're on top of everything that's happening. Sometimes users come to us. Sometimes different teams come to us. We have to make sure we communicate. Always communication in this field, in this career, definitely is one of the biggest aspects, biggest tools. So if you're good at it, you'd be a great fit. We check Azure DevOps to manage the backlog. There's different tools. Maybe you guys have heard of Atlassian, right? They own, I think, I forget what they use now. It's not Jira, but they have something that has backlog management. They also have Trello and different boards, Kanban boards and stuff like that. So we use Azure, and I'm in an Azure house, so we work with a lot of just Azure tools, Azure repositories, Azure DevOps. So we use this, and I manage the backlog there. We have a list of our features, list of the features broken down to different user stories. And without getting into too much details, basically we try to break the feature down, because the feature is super large. Sometimes it can be pretty large. We want to break it down to little parts, and then that's what we turn it into, like these little incremental pieces, which then the engineer will start working on. So that's the one. And then we also have refinements with our team. What that basically means, and if anyone here is familiar with Agile, we do refinements to just make sure we, as a team, including as the engineers and the product manager, any stakeholders that may be needed as well, we go in there to just make sure we refine it. Like, hey, this feature doesn't make sense. Are we able to do it this way, that way? Are there any blockers? Do we depend on another team? Let's say that we have another team that is providing us the data. Maybe they're not ready to, let's say there's a data quality issue. Maybe they need to start prioritizing that fix before we can actually take that data and do something with it. So we have different, dependencies. We have to talk about that, and we have to refine it. So this happens almost on a weekly cadence, sometimes often more, sometimes less, depends on the product manager. And to move forward, meetings, tons of meetings. Refinements are a meeting too. So we have a lot of meetings. We meet with stakeholders. We meet with dependent teams and applications. I'll be meeting, certain teams within my product space. Sometimes I'll meet with our competitors, or not competitors, rather our users. We do competitor research to understand what other users are doing within other products that are in our space. So in general, we try to get some sort of lot of communication, a lot of meetings, and we try to assess the requirements. Right? We talk to design team, we talk to business, we talk to finance, we talk to legal, we talk to software engineers. We try to build something together, making sure that everyone is in the right place. Like I said, try to make that squiggly line as straight as possible. Planning out releases. We plan our releases. We want to build a new feature. We want to ship it out, just like how you guys have 48 hours or what, like, 3 days to build out something for a hackathon. We have, like, let's say 3 months or a month to build out a feature and launch it out. So we have something similar, right? But it's just a little more complex because we have different designers that are there, different products that are all dependent on it. So we plan out the releases that way so that we can provide value at the end of it, just like how you guys are. Product launch, market research, documentation. These are all the little things that we also do as well. Sometimes I'll even jump in, I'll write blog articles to market our product to make it, sound like, okay, we're doing a really awesome release. I'll document things. So like a future engineer who jumps on or a future product manager who jumps on understands some of the context of what we're doing in the database. We'll launch the product. We make sure that, all users are ready. We do a huge onboarding. We make sure, like just dependent teams are aware. So that goes to the last bullet. Coordinating with dependent teams, assessing impact and mitigating issues. As a product manager, you look at a roadmap and you'll also be, you'll often get feedback. Oh, we have an issue here. We have an issue here. We're blocked here. You go in there, you try to see if you can escalate it, how you can mitigate this, how you can mitigate the problem, how you can avoid it, what you can do to manage it. So let's say, a problem occurs and you can't release on time. You have to go talk to your stakeholders. There's a lot of, back and forth to just make sure that we can release something properly. The goal is to release and ship something, an idea, into real life, right? So I think this one will be interesting. I sound like, I make it sound like these are all these super cool job descriptions or things that you can do, but there's a lot of challenges in this. And I'll try to, there's a lot more than this, but these are the high level ones I can try to bring up. In a way, you own the success or failure of a product's release. This is sometimes super awesome, right? Think about, like, for example, Sundar Pichai, right? He's the Google CEO at this time, previous product manager, had some excellent product shipping, right? I think it was Gmail or Android, some of the staples and juggernauts of our technology now. It's super fulfilling, right? To impact so many users, has a huge difference in people's lives sometimes. And this is an awesome thing, but this is a double-edged sword as well. If a feature does not work to be within your favor, or sometimes maybe it does not come to be how you expected it to be, it can be a Debbie Downer, right? It can just kind of really, it makes you feel like, okay, you really worked on building something and it didn't come out to be the way you expected it. You hit some, you're looking to get some KPIs, you're trying to measure success and you're not able to fully get there. It happens. Not everything is going to be perfect. Not every idea is always going to be the next best big thing. This second one is super duper important. The thing is, when I first got into product management, and this was in college, I didn't even know about it until like my last 2 years. Um, Product management, the way people describe it is like, hey, you own the product, you're like a CEO of a product, and you build what you can with that, right? You build a product. The reality, I don't know if this makes much sense, and I would like to say that it's a lot more like being a CEO of a scrappy startup. I think someone else told me that, and I found it hilarious. It's like that. Like, you're super stressed, and you can't really do much. You're like kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. And the thing is, you have no authority. You manage the product, but you don't manage the engineers. You don't manage the designers. You don't manage the how that happens. You lead by influence. So you can have an idea, you can have a vision, but you can't necessarily make a say like, all right, guys, like, do this or else. It doesn't work like that. You have to have an influence. You have to be able to convince your engineering team and the people around you that, like, hey, this actually makes sense. This is how we can act. Like, there's a vision here. There's the potential to be something awesome, and you have to lead by influence. That's one of the biggest things we have to do. So I remember when in Northwell, our senior director, who I reported to, she was really good at this. She was able to convey the vision of something like, how we can impact a patient's lives to the engineers, or to like our stakeholders, and make it sound like, okay, this is a really awesome feature. You're gonna really find value in this. So that's something that, is one of the largest challenges you have to overcome, is that you really don't have authority. You're talking about building out and managing a product, but you don't have a say in it, and you don't manage anything, the intricacies or the components within that product, right, that are building it for you. Stakeholder management is hard. When you talk to people who are using your product, they'll have a million things to say. Sometimes they'll complain a million times, right? I mean, I don't know if you guys, some of you drive or not. Go to like a DMV. I'm sure you guys have a list of complaints. People will be like, okay, this needs work, this needs work. They'll give you a whole list. It's a laundry list. Stakeholder management is hard. They'll tell you, fix this, that, this will be better. This is awesome. Can you please do this for me? It is a tough thing to say no, but you have to get good at it. Sometimes when you ask someone for a wish list, right? You're asking Santa for a wish list, you're going to get all this stuff, but do you really need everything? Sometimes you have to find out within that list, what is the most value? What would you like? What would make you happy right now if I did this for you right now? So that's what we want to get good at. Stakeholder management is a difficult thing to do because the asks are very heavy, but you have to be able to coordinate and understand, okay, this is where the value is from the huge list of stuff you gave. I think this is what you'd be happiest with. And this is, do you agree? And you try to get that to be a reality. I want to move forward and say there's levels of uncertainties as well. So there's always blockers in a large organization, you name it, if it's a tech company, finance, healthcare, whatever, there's always going to be issues. There's always going to be something wrong, something will pop up, and you're always going to have to mitigate it. It's going to impact the release somehow. You have a plan, you have a product, you have some people you want to satisfy, businesses looking at you. You want to make sure you can mitigate that. And also other applications have their own priorities. So just like I said, let's say, let's go back to this example. I guess I'm a big fan of Instagram today. So let's say Instagram Reels pop in, but that may impact somebody who makes like IG videos, right? Because someone is looking at 3 to 5 minute videos. And then now they're saying, okay, no, we have like 30-second or 15-second videos too. Maybe they no longer care about those long videos and they want to stick to the short ones like Reels. So you have dependent applications that have their own priorities, they have their own vision, and you kind of have to make sure you get buy-in. Does this make sense? Can we cooperate, and can this be in one product ecosystem together? Can it actually be a benefit? So you have to kind of think about the trade-offs with that as well. So it's a lot of just different juggling between others, different applications. Maybe it's your own stakeholders, maybe it's your own internal teams. It's just a way for you to manage and get buy-in from them and prioritize your future to be a success. I think this may be close to some of the last ones, so I'm going to just battle it right through this, and then I'll leave the end for any questions you guys may have, okay? So what do I need to know to be a product manager? How to collaborate with different teams and influence. Collaboration with designers and engineers and you name it, like just different fields, different folks working in different sides of the coin. How do you work with them? How do you collaborate with them? How do you influence them to make sure that you can build something, we all could build something super successful. Sometimes that often questions people give is like, what if I'm not good at designing? I know nothing about design, or I know nothing about finance. How can I do that? Well, the thing is, product manager is more like a jack of all trades but master of none. We may know how a UI can work and what would be nice to use on a UI. We may know that this is the budget for finance, this is what they would like to hit, or these are the numbers, like we get the numbers. But you're not either of those. You're not any of those or master of those. You kind of just like a little bit of everything, and you kind of try to make them all connect with each other so they can build something successful. So oftentimes I hear like, oh, we're in technology product management. Do I need to know how to code? There are many product managers that don't know how to code, even in Google. I'm pretty sure it would be advantageous to know, but it's not. I don't think it's a prerequisite. You just need to know how to improve the business. So that goes to the second one, understanding the business and therefore understanding how to improve it. It's always good to know the business that you're in so you can improve it. I suppose if you were a big fan of music, Spotify or Apple Music would be a great product for you because you would know exactly as a user, this is what I would like. I understand some of the ideas within this. I know how to improve this. It's like a way, you could think about it. So oftentimes in order to improve a product, build a feature that people like, you need to be in that position to actually know it. Having business knowledge or having a domain knowledge of it is a really good advantage. Third bullet is being able to empathize with the user. You want to understand what the user feels, your consumer, whether it be us or it's another business or whoever it is. You want to be able to understand their needs and be able to fulfill them in a way where it satisfies them, and also in a way where, let's say, it's not, sometimes a user will tell you to walk on water. They'll tell you to do the most craziest things. Okay, do this, that. Maybe it just only applies to just them. Maybe it's just a personal thing. It may not really help anyone else. So you kind of have to be able to understand what the user's needs are. Oh, is this like particularly what you're feeling? Is this what everyone's feeling? How do we get that feedback? This is how you get those surveys. You do testing, and you really go through feedback loops, and you try to understand the users, and you try to get that sort of just find the needs out from them. Be creative, understand technical limitations, allow yourself to find value. You have to be creative. I mean, think about it. Like you're building this, you're trying to build something and succeed in this hackathon, right? You want to build and create something. You want to make sure that you have to understand that you can't just like, in X amount of days, you may not be able to take on a project that takes a couple years, right? You have to maybe, decrease the scope, make it like just an MVP, a prototype, and but you want to still show like, okay, this is a really creative idea. I wasn't able to build a full, single page application or something like that, but I can show you a prototype, a mock-up or something a UX designer built, and you can convey to someone, this is where the value is. This is what it can potentially do if you let me build it. And you want to show that value to others. Last but not least, mitigate problems quickly, effectively, and keep things on track. Always remember that line is never straight. It's always all over the place. You want to be able to make sure that roadmap is as smooth as possible. So mitigating problems is always something that's important. Sometimes at the end of the day, I mean, unless you're working at, I guess, a cancer institute, you're not necessarily curing cancer, right? You want to make sure your problems don't impact your users. You want to make sure that, hey, all right, problems happen. It's reality. Let's see if we can move it. Let's see if we can adjust this. Let's see if we can do something like that. So unless you're working with a problem, let's say sometimes in our case in S&P, we have to work with regulators. That's like a what do you call this, a rock and a hard, but we really can't do those sort of scenarios. We have to complete them. It's not something that I can say, oh, there's a blocker, or let's just push it. We can't push it. Those certain aspects like that you have to be on top of. But generally, that's what mitigation strategies are for. We want to be able to understand how to effectively decrease the problems that you're going to face. I hope I didn't go off on a tangent, but I think that covers a lot of this. Pretty straightforward. And that closes it off. I think that should be around 40 minutes or so, but I'll leave you guys for any questions. And of course, even after this, if you have any questions or you're more interested in this, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or reach out to me on Discord. I'm on the channel as well. And I'll leave it to you guys. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me. And I'm happy to go through the slides. You let me know, and I'll reiterate anything that you have. Okay.
All right, so if anyone has any questions, you're always welcome to, oh, wait, Fima has one. So
Sure.
she says, do you have any resources that we could look into for learning and developing skills as a product manager?
Yeah, totally. So when I was interning, I used to go to this place called the product school. I don't know if it's the product school. It is. They used to do weekly call, like what do you call weekly talks and stuff. That's one. You can also just typically, I believe there's even a subreddit called subreddit product management. You can check that one out. Um, I typically would just look for like product management. I believe it or not, when I first started and I was really interested, I actually went around and asked people on LinkedIn. I'd be like, what did you do? Like, how did you get into this? It's not very common necessarily if you think about it, like in order to be a product manager, you need to know the business domain quite well. And sometimes you may not know the business domain unless you spend some years within it. So typically you don't necessarily get like someone coming straight out of graduation and saying, okay, I'm going to be a product manager. But the awesome thing is nowadays it's become more common than ever. Facebook, Google, I think Twitter, they have rotational programs where you can just go in as a new grad and they'll actually have you in as a product manager. They'll rotate you in different parts of the product ecosystem they have, and you can learn it. So look into like sources through Reddit, look in product school. I think there's like, you can just go to Atlassian as well. I think their main website has a bunch of information for PMs. Things like that, search it up. Just honestly, just Google it. I would recommend reaching out to people. That's one of the best things. Like that's how I learned a lot, was that I had some really good mentors. They were really strong, really influential product managers and product leads, and they would be able to strategize things very well. So when you guys go into like a tech internship, right? Let's say like, one of you are in a tech internship, maybe you can ask, hey, is there a product manager here? See what they do. Ask a day-to-day. I remember asking the day-to-day when I was at CNN. I didn't even understand product at the time, but they would be like giving me all these like super high level details on the vision. So just ask around as well. I think that's pretty useful. Check out those. What I can do is I will put up some maybe on the Discord channel. I'll just write some sort of resources, but in general, just search up like, I think Product School is a good one. YouTube has a bunch of videos on like, different people taking products, certain like, product roadmaps, how to take on certain problems. So that's a good resource as well. I think YouTube, I use YouTube for a lot. Does that answer? Okay. All right. I see Steph with the hands up.
Hi,
Hey.
thank you. I was wondering if you have any advice for a really small team of just developers, and we have a vision for an app with a clear MVP, but none of us have experience in product management. And what could be like the first steps from going to dreaming about our MVP and idealizing the app to actually like doing the work.
Yeah, so I'm glad you mentioned this because a lot of the times, and especially through this deck, I make it sound like it's a role, but in reality, it's more like a responsibility that anyone on the team kind of has. If you have a product mindset and you think about like, okay, I want to build something, like I have an idea. You just said you have like a vision, right? And you want to put that into reality. How can I make that happen within, let's say, a timeline, right? Timelines are super important in product management. I want to make sure we can deliver this like super cool idea or project within 5 days, 3 days. Sometimes you'll realize, okay, we're gonna have to cut a lot of things out. I won't be able to add this sort of capability. I won't be able to add this capability, but maybe I can show like a mock-up of it, or maybe I can show like some sort of like a prototype on it, like a given idea, like, oh, these are potential opportunities I can do with this, this bare bone MVP that I built. These are X, Y, and Z. These are ideas I can put in as well. It's scalable. That sort of potential is also a good way to do that. So you may not necessarily need to build it, but you can take a look and be like, okay, I can't build it, but I'll just show like here's potential mock-ups of some MVP2, MVP3, how we can further iterate on this and build it further. So one of the first things I would say is reassess your timeline and descope. It's a reality in PMs. We descope a lot. We'll look at something and be like, okay, we want to like build a world. We can't, right? We have a timeline. We have business. We have to make sure we have to get that done. So we start trickling slowly constricting it to find out what the best meat and the best value is. All right. You don't want to, if you have like like if you have an app and you have like three different features, try to see like which one is the most important one, which one is the one that would get the most value out of something. Try to find like the top two of those and see if you can build out within the time, and then take that last one and show it as like a potential enhancement, potential feature that you can add in the future. Show a quick mock-up, be like, okay, in the future we can also do this. That shows you that, hey, we haven't just thought of building a quick MVP, like we have a vision, and we've also shown you like these are the potential ways we can do it. So that's what I would recommend, especially in a timeline or time scenario like a lot of you have. That would be helpful. Does that help?
Yes, thank you. That was interesting.
Okay, so we have another question from the chat. And Lynn says, if the new feature your team's launching is conflicting with another team's product, how would you tackle that?
See, that's a good question. So this happens. It happens, and it really depends. Ultimately, there's a lot of, you want to look at the numbers. I think that's an important aspect. We try to look at what makes sense. Sometimes we have, like for my instance, my database gets data from different sources. Sometimes our products, downstream, they want something that the data upstream is not ready to give. We don't have it, or maybe they want to provide it in their own fashion. They have their own timeline. They want to provide it next year in a really cool way. What my customers said they want it now. They want it yesterday. So how do we do that? So we look at it, we try to see, okay, here are the trade-offs. If I can't provide this now, this is what I can provide. This is the potential way I can provide it without impacting your deliverable. And we do sort of a buy-in, sort of a negotiation between products, between the application teams, and try to figure it out. Sometimes you will also realize that let's say like, you have a feature that's conflicting with another product's feature. Which one ends up providing more value? Sometimes you realize that you putting yourself into that person's feature or that team's feature may provide you more value. So yes, we want to take on a feature on our own and be like, captains of that, and, totally advocate on it and own it. But sometimes the product gain is a business gain, and it may not be just you. You're one piece of the puzzle, right? So working with another team and seeing if their product is actually worth, like, hey, maybe we should look at building out something for them, or build out how to help them enhance the product, is a better way, and it will provide us even more value than what we measured independently. These are some ways, but ultimately it really does depend on the product, it depends on the feature, and you should always look at the numbers. I think it always makes sense to look at the metrics and see how much value is being given from each one respectively. You can determine that way which one is more important to build, which one follows a timeline that's more achievable, and which one ultimately makes users happier. Does that help?
All
Yeah,
right.
that certainly does. Sorry.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, sorry. I was the one who asked the question.
Oh, okay.
And I was going to say that, yeah, your answer really helped.
Sure. Awesome.
Okay, cool. So we have one more question in the chat, and it says, earlier you said that product managers lead by influence. What would you do if your team member is not cooperating?
So what is the reason they're not cooperating? It could be any reason. One could be, typically it's rare to see this. I'll be honest, throughout my experience, I've never actually had it. Even as a developer, I would never just be like, hey, I'm not into this. I don't want to do this. So typically they'd have a reason. Sometimes it happens where, excuse me, a team member, a subject matter expert, for instance, in our team, in my team particularly, we have a lot of people who have serious domain knowledge. They know the financial realm. They also know the software realm very well. They can connect the dots. They'll tell me technical limitations. They'll be like, okay, this is accruing a lot. This is going to accrue a lot of technical debt. It's going to cost us maybe another 6 months to clean this debt up. And that's why we shouldn't do this. If that reason makes sense, if it makes sense for us, you can validate the reasoning. We can speak to the leads. We can speak to other engineers. We can speak to the tech leadership. See, does it does it actually true? Does it hold weight? In that case, that engineer who may have disagreed may be totally in the right. Maybe there may be a huge restriction. Sometimes an idea sounds like a great idea, but once you start seeing, is it actually possible? We have to see if there's limitations there. So unless the engineer just says like, hey, I'm having a bad day and I really don't want to mess with, help you out, majority of the time, if they don't want to work on it, it's probably for a reason, because they see or they think that they put their product hat on for a little bit and they thought, okay, in a technical standpoint, knowing my background, there may be an issue here. So sometimes it's valuable. Oftentimes it's mostly because of that sort of reason, but rarely have I ever seen it because like just pure negligence or because they're just not into it. I think that's it. Hopefully that helps. But if you guys, yeah, sure, let's do it. Hey, Steph.
Oh, I was just applauding. Thank
Oh,
you.
okay, sure. Yeah, so if you guys have any more questions, feel free to mention it. I specifically, because I know a lot of you are working through, you're developing and you're building out a project. My deck may not directly help you with a hard skill or a technical skill, but hopefully gives you some sort of idea on how to build something and present it in a way where you can, someone who's looking at it can be like, wow, this thing can actually, do something pretty cool. And they don't just look at it and be like, oh, it's beautiful, but it's not, it was poorly executed. So sometimes just understanding the product and what you want to build, take a step back. Don't look at the code so much and be like, oh, what am I actually building? Will it actually do anything? Is it cool? So like ask yourself that question. I think that's often really important.
Yeah, okay. So if anyone has any last questions, you guys are welcome to unmute yourself, just raise your hand and ask away, or you can pop it in chat and I'll moderate. But also Fahad is in our Discord, so that's always a way to contact him. And I believe through the hack packs, maybe you can drop your email here as well, if you're willing to put that out there.
Yeah, I'm more available through LinkedIn. So if you have a LinkedIn account, reach out to me. And then if you want to, get my email, just ping me on Discord, just message me there, and I'm happy to send it out to you. That way we can just keep in touch. But generally, I'm mostly almost always available on Discord or LinkedIn. So just reach out to me in one of those. And if you need to have more extensive conversations, we can always get on a call or something like that. Especially if you want to like move, if you find this career point interesting. That's what I just wish when I was like in these times doing hackathons, if someone actually told me about this. No one really did. I only experienced project through an actual PM who I've seen. I'm like, what do you actually do? Maybe or then I looked at it, I'm like, all right, this is kind of cool. So look into it that way. But yes, you can always reach me through the air, through Discord, and I'm happy to send my email out. Angela, I'll probably bring it to you and just share it across.
Okay, well, sounds good. I know it's definitely really late for some of you guys, so I'm just gonna quickly close off and you guys can go and do whatever. And just to remind you guys, a lot of you guys have been asking about recordings. So most of them are up on YouTube already, and this one will be going up soon once I finish this meet. So if you guys need anything, make sure to check over there now. So thank you again so much for our speaker. I'm sure this was really informative for you guys, especially those who asked questions. So thank you everyone for coming out, and we'll just end here. And yeah, so you can always find him on our Discord if you have any questions. That's where to look.
Awesome.
So thank you so much, guys.